speaking of a pained Peyton Manning, he was suffering mentally, evidently, about halfway through the season. John Elway recently did an interview with Sports Illustrated and a writer named S.L. Price.
Sure.
And John was very revealing. Interesting quote here that he gave S.L. Price. This is courtesy of Sports Illustrated. After the Rams game, a game in which Peyton went 34 of 54, 389 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions, and showed bad body language the whole game, John Elway went to Peyton Manning after the game and said this. I said, dude, you're so uptight, you don't look like you're enjoying this at all. We're good enough now that you don't have to do that. The harder you try, the worse it's going to get. That's John Elway talking to Peyton Manning. The harder you try, the worse it's going to get. That's pretty big stuff. That's basically John saying, Peyton, you got to relax here, man. You're killing us and you're killing you, the body language, everything.
Well,
you're trying too hard.
Some interesting things about it. Having done a story that blew up nationally 2 or 3 years ago when Tebow was here, and I talked to John Elway, and this is the setup for what's going on here. I talked to John Elway, who was in his first year as the, quote, general manager, executive director.
Oh, I know where you're going here.
And I have an entire conversation on the phone with him. I was sitting at home, and I was talking about his first year. That's what's going to be the column. Your first year, it's complete. It's almost complete now. You're in the playoffs. You know, turned it around. All of that stuff. And I said, by the way, John, and I've known him since he was a kid. I said, by the way, are you going to talk to Tebow this week? And he said, no. Why not? I don't want to get into his head or anything. And I said, well, what would you say to him if you're going to talk to him?
It's this one, isn't it?
And he said, pull the trigger.
Pull the trigger.
Meaning,
I remember that.
Pass the football. Don't hesitate, stuff like that.
Don't think before you throw. Just throw the damn ball.
He actually, I misquoted him because there was one more word in there. Now you know the rest of the story.
Please pull the trigger? Is it please pull the trigger?
And so I went,
pull the blanking trigger.
Forget the rest of the story. And I basically hung up on John at that point because I got my story.
Yeah.
Pull the trigger. John Elway says to Tebow, pull the trigger through me. And I said to someone at that point, I just got the money shot.
Oh, yeah.
and that could work in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, well, don't.
And that went viral. I mean, that went viral
was
on
huge.
ESPN and every network, ABC, whatever it might be, on the nightly news. So I only bring that up to preface this, that John, and I knew, and I wrote a couple of Sundays ago, that there was a change that happened after the St. Louis game. And I knew enough inside information to know that John had gone to Peyton Manning. He had gone to Adam Gase specifically, and he went to Jack Del Rio. And he had watched this team, and he'd examined what was going on, and he thought that Peyton was too uptight. He thought
John was pissed after that Rams game.
Yeah.
He was really angry about what was going on.
And he thought he knew they were going to have to develop a running game, if you saw what happened.
Yep.
And he wanted Jack Del Rio to be more aggressive and blitz more. So if there was ever a question in your mind, and I wrote it at the draft last year, John Elway runs his team.
Oh, absolutely.
He is a one-man team. There's no 3 people involved in that he's running the team. And this is another example of that John, and see, here's the thing about Peyton. The one guy he will listen to is John Elway.
Yeah.
Because John Elway has been there.
Been there and done
John, Mike Shanahan surrounded John with enough talent to win those 2 Super Bowls. John carried that team like Andrew Luck to those earlier Super Bowls. And I think Andrew Luck, if they get to the Super Bowl this year, any year, it's in the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be because of Andrew Luck, not because of his
no doubt
surrounding
about it.
cast. And so John knows what it's like. He's been there. He's been on that side where he's been too uptight. I saw him. He's been on a side where he wasn't enjoying football. He wanted out of Denver. He wanted away from Dan Reeves. So he is sitting down with, because everybody will ask Peyton all the time. It's funny to me. They'll go, well, did you talk to John about that? And he goes, well, John, the way he answers that is, John and I have talked, over the years. Well, this was a case where, yes, he and John Elway talked. they don't talk that much. I mean, how you doing? Like you and I would say to Peyton.
Yeah, John's not on
But
the field a lot during practice.
This was a
John.
direct conversation, and Peyton will listen to John because he knows John's been there. Not only been there as a player, but been there in that situation.
Well, and I'm going to give you another fairly interesting backstory. When John was growing up, his dad, Jack Elway, of course, was a prominent college coach, knew football backwards and forwards. And when John would come off the field after a Little League football game, after a high school game, after a college game, he would say to his dad, "What do you think?" And his dad rarely talked to him about X's and O's. You know what his dad talked to him about?
Emotion, I would imagine.
Body language, emotion. What are you putting out there for the fans to see, for your teammates to see, for your coaches to see? So this is kind of an extension of that. John talked to Peyton not about X's and O's here. He told him to chill out from a standpoint of showing your emotions, becoming too uptight, becoming too tense.
In that St. Louis game, and I riveted on Peyton Manning, his head was down.
Yeah.
He would leave with a bowed head, and he'd sit on the bench away from everybody.
And he had that Manning face on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost Cutler-like. Cutler's never a guy that's mingling with it. And I thought at the time, he needs to be, because they were in the game. They weren't ever out of the game.
Yeah, the final was 22-7. I mean, they were always within one or two scores.
Sure.
Yeah.
That I think that was where Peyton Manning needed to show leadership and show body language, as you're talking about, and actually go around and say, "Hey guys, we're in this." Because you're not getting, take it for what it's worth, you're not getting that from John Fox.
That's
Fox,
true.
Everybody watching this show, think about this for one moment. Do you ever see John Fox going around and really, patting guys on the butt and going?
Only after a play and if they walk by him. That's about the only time.
He'll go, and hit him on the helmet.
Yeah. But he's not turning around, going back to the bench, talking to guys.
I would think that you want a head coach, and John, I'm talking to you, Fox. You want a head coach that actually goes over to the offensive line and goes, "Guys, you've had some problems here," and halftime goes too fast. They are making adjustments. He's not doing Newt Rockne speeches at halftime. So I think that the leadership from both of them, they both need to chill out, and they both need to, and it did turn around after that. They won all but one game, didn't
Correct. They've won every game but one since then.
And that Cincinnati game, and I told you all week, that Cincinnati game didn't matter. And I said, forget the I.
All right.
That game didn't matter.
All right.
And that game they weren't going to win. Because that game was so important to Cincinnati. And how many times have I told you, if teams are fairly equal, the team that needs it the most is going to win the game. Cincinnati had to win that game, and the Broncos knew, no matter what I had said it wouldn't matter. They're the number 2 seed, and they played like it didn't matter. They played it like an exhibition game.
Okay. You gave me an I told you so. I'm going to give you an I told you so. How many weeks now have I been saying Peyton Manning doesn't look like he's having a good time?
Over and over again.
He's not having a good time. That quote from John Elway was evidence of it.
He didn't look like he was having a good time today.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. But you know what? He might be in playoff mode now. He doesn't really want to deal with the media. He just wants to deal with the X's and O's. He wants to deal with how to dissect the Indianapolis Colts, the whole deal. Yeah. That's Peyton right now, I think. But no, he doesn't look like he's been having a good time.
Peyton, pull the trigger.
Hey.